Very good morning, everyone. I'm Anton Shkaruba. I'm a senior researcher at Estonian University of Life Sciences in Tartu. And in this lovely morning, I would like to talk with you about enabling conditions for nature-based solutions. In other words, why nature-based solutions happening or why they do not in some specific governance contexts. Why actually we're talking about this? Nature-based solutions, they seem to be a very self-evident idea. Like everyone knows, like at least most of you who are here, you know that nature-based solutions, they're useful things, they're relatively simple to explain, and also they are very straightforward in many ways. However, it can be very challenging sometimes to explain those people who are responsible for making decisions and for implementing these decisions in the usability and overall good of nature-based solutions. And why that happened, we'll discuss very briefly during this short session. So basically, the aim we have is to understand constraints and enabling conditions for the development of nature-based solutions. And in this session, we'll have specific focus on 3 Eastern European countries. They are Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. We'll talk a little bit later about those contexts. And a little focus we're going to have is transferability of policy, management, and technology innovation. Why we have this focus for this particular session is that because these 3 countries, they lie just on outskirts of the European Union, on its eastern border. And a lot of things when it comes to policy innovation and management innovation in these countries is taken from the European Union, and often that happens as a part of EU policy or some kind of EU-funded or EU-inspired actions. And it is just useful to see how well it works with nature-based solutions when ideas and ready practices and ready solutions, they are transferred from the European Union to the Eastern Europe. So, what is the challenge here? The challenge is the slow progress in the uptake of nature-based solutions, and this, as I just mentioned, often is attributed to social, political, and governance factors rather than other barriers. And what happens technically is that we may have ready solutions existing in many cities in the region. They still have a lot of lovely small rivers, a lot of lovely green patches, but for many reasons they're disappearing. Rivers becoming canals, they go to tunnels, and instead of green patches we have new blocks of flats or shopping malls. This is not only something happening in Eastern Europe, that also happens in other parts of the world, and probably as a result of this, as an outcome of this discussion, it also will be useful to see what are the mechanisms behind. So basically, what can be mentioned in this regard, what are barriers and what are lessons from the implementation of nature-based solutions can be found in literature. In this paper of Kabish and others published in 2016, 5 types of barriers are identified. The first one is fear of the unknown. Yet, although like we live with nature for decades, it still can be a little bit difficult to conceive an idea to use these natural processes for our very utilitarian things like wastewater treatment, like creating new clean water supplies, using urban nature for recreation and so on. Then it can be kind of this connection between short-term actions and long-term goals, and we'll discuss this a little bit later. Sometimes we need quick decisions, quick action to counteract one or another problem, and on long term some of those quick decisions, they just do not work as well. The next one is discontinuity between short-term actions and long-term plans. Here again we face a similar problem. Say we can have a plan for tomorrow, and this plan of tomorrow is not always a good part of a plan for a period from several years from now. And policymakers and decision makers are often short-sighted, and that's not because they're bad people or they're not professional. It's just life, and quite often they do not have any other choices. Then big and well discussed by now in literature problem is sectoral silos. So people in municipality and in other governmental institutions, they often sit in different offices like planning office, forestry office, urban infrastructure office, wastewater treatment office, like just to name few, and they do not talk to each other. Sometimes they do, but they do not talk about work all the time. And you might face a situation when people from the next door department, they just are not aware of what's going on in this particular department. You might have a very exciting project that covers something that is extremely relevant for those people from this next door office, but they just do not know about it. And although like you send around mails and trying to make some information campaign around, sometimes it's just not successful because they're not interested in what other people do, and it takes an extra effort actually to move forward with this. And the paradigm of growth, like we know that we should have better GDP, we need to have economic growth, and sometimes the very idea of economic growth becomes more important than what is behind this economic growth. Like economic growth in itself is quite a useless thing. It should lead to better welfare, to better well-being of people, but sometimes this idea is more prominent than this idea is more prominent than what is behind this idea. Also, what is useful to mention in this respect are lessons from nature-based solutions developments which we learned in the European Union. One is that nature-based solutions needs to be aesthetically appealing to citizens. Sounds simple, yet not always happening, because not everywhere people are happy with urban nature. Sometimes it looks to them dark and unwelcoming, and they do not want this kind of natural spots in their neighborhood. They want everything sort of civilized, gentrified, and pleasing for their eyes. And this needs to be taken into account when we develop nature-based solutions. Then the other important thing that nature-based solutions, they create new green urban commons, and urban communities should be aware of this. They need to know why it is useful and why it is important for them to have these nature-based solutions in the neighborhood and what good it brings to them. Then experimenting with nature-based solutions requires trust in the local government and in the process itself. This is indeed very important. If local governments are not convinced that this nature-based solution is a good thing and it may help them to solve some of the problems, the actual implementation stage will never happen and it will never be successful. Even if there is a sort of seed money thing that helps them to start something, we really need trust from and understanding from local decision makers for this action to go forward and to be sustainable. Co-creation nature-based solutions require diversity and learning from social innovation. As I mentioned, nature-based solution is deeply innovative in a way that sometimes very obvious things they work differently than they expected and than they used to many people. And we need really to make an effort to explain how familiar and usual regular things, how they can do different things from what people got used to. And for this we sometimes have to think about different kind of communication strategies and different argument and kind of different examples. So citizens know that say this patch of greenery is not only several trees but also kind of solution that plays important functions as regards access to recreation, some biodiversity functions, and that should be clear and understandable. Then nature-based solutions require collaborative governance. That's what we just discussed. it should be cooperation between local authorities and local people. It cannot be just brought from outside as complete strange action. And inclusive narrative of mission of nature-based solution can enable integration of many urban agendas. Nature-based solutions, they're truly multidisciplinary as an idea, and also they need a lot of cross-sectoral integration. And on one hand, that can be difficult to bring all those sectors under the same umbrella, but on the other hand, once you are done, you also can solve any other issues that require this cross-sectoral integration, so it can be useful exercise. And nature-based solutions must be designed so that they can be learned and replicated in the long term. So it should be a successful and interesting example for other locations where this nature-based solution should be replicated. This way your efforts will be more useful and will yield more good things in the future. We have a little bit of time left, and I will talk about 3 particular locations in Belarus, Russia and Ukraine. They are the city of Lviv in Ukraine, the city of Mogilov in Belarus, and the city of Pskov in Russia. They are quite different cities of different sizes, yet they have something in common. The common thing is that none of those are capitals. They are quite important cities, at least historically, in their countries. And they have quite an impressive diversity of nature and nature to people interaction situations. That's why we decided that it can be interesting to look at these 3 specific locations as examples of what's going on in these 3 countries. And indeed, we also looked at institutional contexts and in regulatory contexts in these 3 countries and how they're different. And we tried to make some conclusions based on case studies from these 3 countries. We mostly looked at barriers in implementation of nature-based solutions, and here are our conclusions. The first one is that we found everywhere deficit of strategic foresight for urban development. And what it means practically that planning docs, even strategic ones, they address only short-term issues and objectives and often overlook long-term ones. Something we mentioned before, but this is something that happens really a lot and needs to be repeated over and over to be solved. You see on this picture pictures of from the city of Lviv in Ukraine. River Koltva used to be a lively river in the city, but at the end of 19th century it was put in a tunnel and you cannot see this river anymore. However, topography is still the same, and all water is coming to the same valley, same location as it used to do like for 1,000 years before the city was founded here. So you see like they receive a lot of urban floods, and indeed if the river would be alive, it would be an efficient way to carry this water out of the city downtown. But some decisions taken almost 250 years ago, they still make impact. The other barrier we want to mention that nature-based solutions are mostly promoted by NGOs in Eastern Europe, and they're fueled by international donors. This immediately brings 2 set implications. The first one is that NGOs and traditional epistemic communities such as city planners and architects, they do not necessarily easily find common language and trust. And the architects, they are graduated from national higher education system universities, and they know better what to do in their cities than like any foreign expert brought by NGO people. And this really can be a problem, and it might take a lot of time to resolve it and to come to a common ground. And also importantly, uptake and acceptance of important knowledge and infrastructure is not critical and can be quite troubled. So here we have 2 opposite things which can be happening at the same time. The first one is that NGOs with international funding can be extremely enthusiastic about kind of nature-based solutions they saw somewhere in Europe or elsewhere, and they want to bring it to their own city, own location. They do it, but sometimes it just does not work because like all nature-based solutions, they're very contextually specific. Something that works in Paris not necessarily works in Pskov in Russia or like in Lviv, Ukraine. And this needs some critical view and some critical analysis before the actual implementation of nature-based solution is taking place. And the other tendency comes from the other end. Sometimes some good, practical and working nature-based solutions are rejected just on the ground that it's not something people got used to, and they have doubts that it can work in different locations. Again, this is lack of critical understanding and critical analysis, and the result is that like good and practical solutions, they're not implemented in the locations. The next barrier, that successful examples of nature-based solutions are often missing. This is still a new concept, and something that is convincing and clear, it can be quite difficult to establish. Things take time, and if some good examples would exist, that would help. On one hand, not everything is so hopeless. This is former Soviet Union, and it is in the Soviet planning and architectural school that green solutions are common in the city. Green infrastructure was planned, and sometimes it was implemented less successful than it was planned. Yet it is in place, but it is often in a very miserable state, and nobody remembers actually why this or that technical or planning solution was implemented. And a lot of was developed on the top of those Soviet-built solutions, and many things, many solutions developed in former USSR time do not function anymore. So they do not work well as good examples in most cases, and yet good examples are needed. There are some demonstration cases, but they are either small scale or cannot be explained well for many reasons. Just the simple reason can be that artificial wetland for cleaning storm waters sometimes is not really branded as such, because if it would be branded as a sort of something to clean the water, it means that it would need like the whole environmental impact assessment cycle to go through, and international donors, they never give money for this long time. So this is a little conflict of time. So the next problem is nature-based solutions need to appear in national documents to be taken seriously. This is so. If people from municipalities, local decision makings, if they do not see that something is integrated part of national policy, they often just overlook it. Like the very common thing that the paved surfaces, sealed surfaces, they extend in the city because like it's normal. I mean, it's an institution that exists for long. Cobbled stones and asphalt used to be believed to be a nice thing, while something green usually referred to as something expensive to maintain and difficult to develop and look nice. So we have a lot of asphalted surfaces in the city. The next barrier is that successful implementation of nature-based solution is an iterative process that involves integration across fields and departments and adaptive management. And most importantly, robust governance is the key. If a country has a robust governance system, if regulation is enforced well, then things work. If we do not have this, then things do not work. These pictures they are taken from Pskov, Mogilov, Lviv. You see that people park the cars on lawns next to the houses. This is a very clear feature of governance that is not working well. And this is actually, in all this discussion, is the first step to take. It was my last slide, and please ask your questions if you have any. You can see my email on this page. Thank you.